This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Wednesday. It's July 12th, 2023. Thank you for joining us at thetruthcentral.com. The first story I want to cover today has to do with the World War II story, which I think is extremely important. I've been working with Douglas Horne. Now, Douglas Horne, for some of you may know, Douglas Horne was on the ARRB, the Assassinations Records Review Board, in the 90s, which made so many of the Kennedy assassination documents available. I mean, this was after the Oliver Stone movie. And now Douglas Horne has also gone into Pearl Harbor, and he has this book out, which is called the McCollum Memorandum. And he's done the same thing he did with JFK. I mean, Douglas Horne is one of the reasons we know as much about the Kennedy assassination as we do today. And that's how it starts. You can see we've done a video with him, which actually goes almost 3 hours. And Douglas Horne is brilliant on this. He's just magnificent. He goes through the history of how FDR planned to get us into World War II by baiting the Japanese to attack us at Pearl Harbor. And the basis of the story is that FDR and the American Navy military was tracking the Japanese fleet coming across the Pacific. We knew they were going to attack. And Roosevelt did nothing to warn Pearl Harbor. Because if Japan attacked us, a nation which did not want to go to war would be, on the surprise attack in Pearl Harbor, would be motivated now to go to war, which happened. But it was completely a deceit, because Roosevelt cut off the Japanese oil. He knew that we weren't going to get into war with Germany. We'd had submarines, Nazi submarines in the Atlantic, which had torpedoed American ships, and the American people didn't care. American people had enough of European wars after World War I. America didn't want to do it again. And so Roosevelt figured he put the fleet out in Pearl Harbor, and then he baited the Japanese to attack it. He cut off the oil. It's a fascinating story. It would make a great movie. And I really encourage everybody to watch this video and to get the book. You can get it on Amazon. It's called The McCollum Memorandum by Douglas Horne. I think you're going to really enjoy it. We're going to start featuring it here for the next couple of days, and it's up on YouTube. We're putting it on all kinds of channels. It's getting out there, but it's a magnificent video, and I really implore you to watch it. It will inform you for today, because today, again, government lies. We're being manipulated into a situation, potentially World War III, and this could not be more timely. Okay, now let's cover the stories that I've set up for today. First one I want to cover is that these automakers are finding out that this electric car nonsense is really a complete boondoggle. That essentially, the Biden administration saying by 2030 or 2035, 75% of all cars are going to be electric. Well, people don't want them. It's another woke and broke. This article begins much like the soy meat substitutes were supposed to be the huge new thing, until it turned out people are perfectly happy eating meat. Well, no big deal there. I mean, surprise, surprise. So a combination of government bribes and pressures, this ESG, this environmental social governance, this led echo chambers where the automakers thought they had to start making electric cars that people don't want and can't afford. So if you take a look at it, the nationwide supply of EVs, electric vehicles, has swelled 350% this year to 92,000 units. That's a 92-day supply, roughly 3 months worth of EVs, nearly twice the industry average. People aren't buying them. And the official 5-year plan is to wipe out by 2030 any gasoline cars. And here's Ford expects to sell 2 million electric cars in 2025. 2025, that's 2 years from now. Last year, they only sold 61,575. How are they going to go to 2 million? How do you go from selling tens of thousands of cars to millions? The car maker couldn't even sell 2 million cars in 2023. How's it going to sell 2 million of a type of vehicle that few want or can afford? So the Ford Soros investment in this whole electric vehicle, truck manufacturing, Ford's going to lose a lot of money. Ford's going to lose $3 billion on electric cars, which the Soros Group is pushing. GM plans to do 1 million electric cars by 2025. It sold less than 40,000. The electric cars don't really work. They're heavy. The batteries catch fire. They have to be recharged. The recharging takes electricity. Electricity requires hydrocarbon fuels. I've started reading a new book, which I'm going to start recommending to everyone. Let me see if I can find it here on my bookshelf. I was reading and carrying it around yesterday. I may have left it in the other room. It's Judith Curry. I'm going to start talking about it. She's a brilliant climate scientist who was originally all in for the climate movement and who realized it's a hoax. And her books now are excellent. I'm going to start featuring her and probably try to interview her. But this whole move to green energy, which is predicated on that if we don't do something urgently, the climate is going to be such that we are all going to die because there's global warming coming because hydrocarbon fuels emitting carbon dioxide is nonsense. The climate is far more complex than this. And now the idea that the heat is what's causing, global warming is causing all this massive heat. First of all, it's summer, people. It's hot. We've had much, much hotter summers. The 1930s had much hotter summers. 1936 was setting records which still stand today. Most people, were not alive. 1936. People who are alive are approaching 90 years old or older. I mean, this is ridiculous. That, we can't remember 100 years of Earth history. It's that easily, the data is rigged. Well, I think what changed Judith Curry was when she realized that the climate gate, and I write about this, I will pull this one. I write about this extensively in my book on the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change, because I want to make it clear to everybody. And here's the book. People have got to start reading. Please start reading. That's Judith Curry. When she was younger, she's a bit older than that right now. But everything I'm writing in the book, I find in her work an agreement with. The major issue is the sun. The sun heats the earth. We're actually in a cycle 25 is right now in a hot period. The sun is burning more sunspots than it has been in the cycle, but we're in a 300-year cycle. A sun cycle is about 11 years, which is what it takes the magnetism and all the action inside the sun to go through a cycle. A cycle is, either hot or cold. It's either a lot of sunspots or the sun's not very active. And this is the major impact on Earth for the last 300 years, and it's been tracked, I think, more than 400 years. The temperatures on Earth, average temperatures, have varied very much in accordance with whether the sun is in a hot period or a minimum period. When the sun is in a minimum period, we have little ice ages. When it's burning in a hot period, we have like the medieval warming period. We're right now in an interglacial warming period, and the sun is burning hotter than it has been, but yet it is not as hot as it's been in the past. Okay, so when you go back 300 years, we've had hotter burnings of the sun. That's the major impact. That's the temperature knob of Earth, not carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a relatively minor molecule in the atmosphere. It is a greenhouse gas, but 70% of all greenhouse gases are water vapor. Now you're going to begin hearing the climate change movement has shifted. It first was global warming. Well, that didn't sell hard enough. Warming sounds fuzzy. You know, we now talk about global heating. And they went to climate change. Well, now they're going to climate emergency. That's the new change in the rhetoric. And this is neo-Marxism. This is an attempt, as I document in the first book, is an attempt to have climate lies, this lying science, in order to advance an ideological goal, which is to stop using hydrocarbon fuels because hydrocarbon fuels are the engine of capitalism. And this group started out as the whole evolution of this movement, the climate change movement, especially with John Holdren teaming up with Paul Ehrlich in the 1960s. Holdren was Obama's science czar, and Ehrlich was a population bomb. That was his big book. There's too many people. And this whole group is aimed at reducing the number of people in the world. We're dealing with depopulationists, neo-Marxists, and they've learned how to become cultural Maoism. Chris will show the second book, which is in press right now, and it will be out soon, which is the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. These people produce anarchy. That's their goal. Communism can only destroy, and they're in the process of trying to destroy. This book will be out very soon, and it's the complement to this. You'll see all my books are, right now I'm trying to write the truth about energy, global warming, climate change, the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy, the truth about World War II with Douglas Horne. These themes all fit together, and the website's The Truth Central. The only way we can beat this age of disinformation and lying is if we tell the truth and we find the truth. It's fact-based. It's not based on some idea of what the Marxists postulate the perfect world's going to look like. And then they want you only to advance ideas that are consistent ideologically with those themes. And their themes have been this critical race theory and critical theory in general, which pits people against each other and says that we're an evil country that needs to be destroyed because we were starting out as racists with slavery. Those slave owners wrote a constitution. Well, also we fought a civil war and we've ended slavery, and that is not celebrated by the left. So when we get to the next story, which I think is in a sense, a continuation of this theme, I want you to realize that this is not an accidental movement. Okay, so now we're seeing that the human rights violations are beginning to be reported in over 100 cases of alleged human rights violations and environmental abuses by Chinese-invested companies in mineral mining supply chain operations. And this has been reported by the Business and Human Rights Resource Center in London, England. So they've just done a report, 102 allegations of abuse are linked to these Chinese companies. What the left wants to say is we're in transition. We're going to transition to renewables. Well, that transition is not going to happen anytime fast. You do not have electric and wind scalable or powerful enough to power cities, and the left knows it. They are trying to create conditions which will end up in negation, destruction, war, famine. It's what the communists always do to gain totalitarian control. They come in promising utopia. What they create is hell on earth. Now, I've done two stories here. The one is published by two Australians, professors in Australia, and what they're saying is that this great famine reset, you will own nothing and you will be starving. Now, again, this is a very important continuation of the theme I'm developing here today, which is that the World Economic Forum, which did a book on COVID-19 reset. So Schwab considers that COVID-19 was a rare but narrow window of opportunity that raised to meet the global economy, which is the elimination of national borders and the removal of property rights, in which no one will own anything, and we'll all be happy. Yeah, well, what they're doing is they're jeopardizing our food security. So the oligarchical plans to compromise food security and destroy property rights are well underway. Take, for instance, the example of the Netherlands, a tiny country of land and in its terms of land and population, yet it's the second largest food exporter in the world. And all this is going to come to an end because of government environmental policies that effectively blame farming for high greenhouse emissions, despite the nation contributing only 5.2% of all EU emissions. It's estimated up to 3,000 farmers would have to close down their production farms in that country. This is insanity. This is suicide. So the global warming alarmists claim that nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas, and therefore we must stop meat production. And nitrous oxide also features in fertilizer. And so therefore, because it's a greenhouse gas, the U.S. Department of Agriculture recently issued a disturbing report that essentially warns the American people about inevitable food shortages. They're already signaling that they're going to do this. Now, in the next article I published, it's on yesterday, was on American Thinker, where I wrote an article about that the climate alarmist war on nitrous oxide threatens the food supply. In November 2022, 4 eminent scientists issued a theoretical paper. It was called Nitrous Oxide and Climate. It proves that the UN's panel, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, war on nitrous oxide to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 threatens to cause a major significant collapse in the world's food supply. The article's authors were eminent scientists in their fields. There was a physicist at one of the Amsterdam universities. There was a guy named Ferguson at the University of Pennsylvania. He had specialty in developing computer models on the effect of nitrous oxides on dairy farming. And Will Happer, professor emeritus at Princeton, Happer praised my book. I'll read you what Happer wrote about my book, because I was very proud to get this one from someone as distinguished as Happer. He said, Dr. Corsi's new book is a trove of information, especially about the people and motives that have driven the current climate frenzy. The discussion of climate science, especially the dominant role of the sun and the clouds, is very good. There are also fascinating discussions of unfashionable and perhaps incorrect scientific theories about abiogenic hydrocarbons, abiotic oil, or alternatives to plate tectonics. I argue that the Earth has expanded in geologic time. So, but these arguments help to clarify the all too human nature of science and how hard it is initially to distinguish between a paradigm shift and a mistake. Mistake being today's alarm over, quote, carbon pollution. A lot of eminent scientists are waking up and speaking out and saying that this is nonsense. So the core argument here is that, essentially we have a need for food, that this nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide and methane, all of these are minor greenhouse gases. And so the report says it's not only possible to maintain highly productive agriculture it's not possible to maintain highly productive agriculture without nitrogen fertilizer. It is a genuinely frightening thought that the neo-Marxists at the heart of today's climate hysteria have chosen to attack nitrous oxide because millions will die if the governments ban nitrogen fertilizers. The neo-Marxist climate change left knows it. It's why they're attacking greenhouse gases. Their goal is not to save the planet from a climate emergency that they know is not happening. The Earth is not going through exceptional weather features now. We've had floods in Southeast Asia for eons. We've had earthquakes and tornadoes for eons. Many more, in fact, in geological time. When the Earth has an elliptical orbit. Right now we're in a more circular orbit. That's why we're warmer. We're closer to the sun. At nighttime, when the sun is not shining, it gets colder. These are fundamental ideas that the left will not accept. And if we did not have greenhouse gases, all the irradiance of the sun would escape into outer space at night. But the goal here is to kill people, and to kill people with a false ideology and lies. And every time that we have had this, what the people who, in the first article, when I was quoting the scientists who have opposed this global warming movement, they point out that every time in history when the communists do take over, what they do is they kill millions of people. Okay, so you've got a situation in which in China, with Mao, millions of people were killed, the Great Leap Forward. In under Stalin and Lenin, but especially Stalin, the collective farm experiments, the 1930s, millions were killed. And the numbers are staggering. The numbers are not small. It was famine that they caused. And the two solutions to eliminate people are famine and war. And if anyone would just take the time to read the Apocalypse of St. John, the Bible, you can see the four horsemen, of the apocalypse include pestilence, famine, war, which we are now unleashing again. And it's being done in this ideologically driven mode where people are not being told the truth intentionally. Comment?
If you remember the Georgia Guidestones, the recently deceased Georgia Guidestones, read, I understand supposedly this was about reorganizing humanity if something goes wrong, but there's a number here. One of the big components of it was maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. That goes exactly along with what you've been saying about how some of the quote unquote powers that be want to see a very huge population, let's just say, shrinkage, for lack of a better term.
Well, what on the scientist published this article I'm reading from, Jane Goodall said at the World Economic Forum in 2020, all these environmental things we talk about wouldn't be a problem if the world was the size of population that there was 500 years ago. Well, I mean, the world population, is estimated to have been in 1600. It was 500 to 580 million. That's 94% fewer humans in the world than today. We have a very productive world at the moment. And the two ways in which the evil forces, the communists, basically eliminate, and Joseph Stalin's Bolsheviks in Russia killed 40 to 60 million in the former Soviet Union, largely through this collectivization, which produced mass famine. And Mao Zedong's communist regime in China killed 65 to 78 million in China, and they thought nothing about it. But that's nothing compared to what you can do with World War III and nuclear weapons. And they know that in World War II, that's when the millions died. 13 million. There was in World War I, 21.5 million died, of which 13 million were civilians. Civilian deaths were caused by starvation, exposure, disease, military encounters, and massacres. In World War II, 40 to 50 million died, the largest of any war. In the next war, we're going to have billions die because it will be a nuclear war. And the combination of famine and war is what the globalists have known for eons, is what reduces population and gives them control. It's all about control. Now, the last article I want to cover today is this one about NATO and Ukraine. The current NATO meeting in Lithuania is telling the Ukraine that they can join, they'll be allowed to join NATO, but they have to wait a while. Well, right now, see, the NATO have realized that if the NATO countries allow Ukraine to be a member, and Ukraine is at war with Russia, which invaded Ukraine, the NATO nations would have an obligation under the treaty, the NATO treaty, to go to war to defend Ukraine. We would, if we admitted Ukraine to NATO, we would be at war with Russia by definition of that treaty. That's what happened in essentially with the start of World War II, when Great Britain had an agreement with Poland to go to war if Nazi Germany attacked Poland, and Nazi Germany did attack Poland, and Great Britain went to war against Germany. Now, it was a phony war for a while. It didn't really heat up, but then it got very hot, and the Luftwaffe was bombing London, and almost by a bare thread, Great Britain survived. By the way, Douglas Horne tells that story very brilliantly in the McCollum Memorandum. All these things tie together. Now, what NATO is going to do, however, is Biden is going to provide these cluster bombs. And I guess what France is going to do is they're going to provide these long-range missiles. Macron announced on Tuesday that he's going to supply these Scalp long-range missiles to Ukraine. And the French press then reported that the first delivery of the missiles are already in Kiev's hands. First missiles have been delivered, the president announced. And so it's already happened. The UK calls the same weapon its Storm Shadow, a version of the Scalp. And they are considering sending that now to Ukraine. In addition, Biden, who says Ukraine has to wait until the war with Russia is over to join NATO, is meeting with Zelensky today and will probably reinforce the commitment for these cluster bombs. Now, what Russia is saying, Russia is, of course, reacting. The Kremlin is saying that the consequences of this are severe because as soon as these weapons are delivered, Moscow says that the French decision to send these weapons, which can go over 290 kilometers, that's their operational range. Russia said the French decision was enormous and that it remains to be clarified and found out exactly what radius we're talking about for these weapons. This is a statement that came out of the Russian Defense Ministry. One of their spokespersons from the government made the point of, quote, "This, from our point of view, Russia's point of view, is an enormous decision fraught with consequences for the Ukrainian side, because naturally this will force us to take countermeasures." He stressed that the Ukraine missiles only aggravates its fate. Okay, now what is he saying? What the Russians are saying is that if NATO wants to be in this phony war, in this surrogate war with Russia, Russia is going to see it as such. Russia is going to see that France is at war with Russia through Ukraine. The United States, Germany possibly will send its comparable missiles. The UK. Russia is going to not sit silent on this. Russia has nuclear weapons in Belarus right now, and Putin's simple solution is to use them. I believe the next goal Putin will set is to take Kiev. It's the capital of the country. It's in the eastern part of the country. And by the way, most Americans don't realize that Hillary Clinton started this war in 2013. She accepted money from a Ukrainian oligarch, and basically she was for the Clinton Foundation, and his name was Pinachek. And the idea was to get NATO to accept Ukraine, even in 2013. Our State Departments bought onto that idea. It was one of the issues in Donald Trump's impeachment over his conversation with Zelensky, in which he mentioned the Biden crime family. And the Maidan Revolution or Rebellion, which was organized by Soros and the State Department in Ukraine in 2014, overthrew a legitimately elected president of Ukraine, a guy named what was his name? Yanukovych, and he basically fled to Russia. Now, that's the start of the war, is trying to get Russia views Ukraine as strategically important. It's the access to the Black Sea through Sevastopol, the great seaport, through Crimea. Russia's not going to give that up for geopolitical reasons. Russia's not going to be denied getting into the Atlantic through the Black Sea into the Mediterranean. Russia's taking control of the Black Sea, and it's going to cut off grain coming from Ukraine, which was the breadbasket of a lot of the world. That all those farms, it probably take a decade to get them back in order. And now the supply chain distribution has been cut off by Russia, which is not going to renew the deal to allow Ukraine to use the Black Sea to distribute grain. This is going to cause starvation in Africa. The globalists don't care if Africa dies. We're not supplying energy to Africa, and using wood and dung in Africa to cook meals is the worst thing that could be done, both for health and for carbon dioxide, if you really cared. But the climate change people don't care about global warming. They know that the climate is far too complex to be influenced by human beings. We're a minor factor here. There were 5 extinctions of everything on Earth before human beings ever arrived on the scene. We're just the latest creatures walking around the surface of the Earth, and the power of the sun. I mean, take a look at it someday. Look at some of the photographs of the sun, which show its internal action. This is an enormously powerful burning star that if we didn't have it, we wouldn't be here. And its forces are extraordinary. We have nothing on Earth that's comparable to this, nor would our puny efforts make any difference. The forces that cause a hurricane or a volcano or a flood are enormous. The ocean currents take decades to shift. And the force and power of these currents influencing climate is of order of magnitude we can't even imagine exerting as human beings. We can't design a flashlight battery to store solar energy to power a city. We have to have huge amounts of land devoted to wind farms and solar panels, and they all rust and are rotten, and they can't recycle them without enormous cost and effort. This whole thing is a sham, and it's designed to kill people, and we are well on the way to World War III. That's why I'm warning everyone that the economic decline that's coming is planned. We'll be offering again and promoting even more intensively this book by the end of the week, which is The Coming Global Crash. Going to create a gold rush. Please, if you like the show, please take a look at our sponsors. Up in the corner, we have sponsors. Chris will show them to you in a minute. Please look at Swiss America. They're Walking Liberty $50. You can get up to 250 of these coins as an introductory offer. They're being offered at their price in silver. Get your 401ks, your IRAs, your retirement funds, at least in a significant part, into gold. The stock market is going to crash, and it's going to crash hard probably in the fall. Usually crashes in October. It crashed 10,000 points. If you're in mutual funds, better find out if you're in ESG mutual funds. Better find out if you're getting the best return. That's Decision Technologies. Take a look at what Eric Smith has. He's got a tool that you can start using right now to see how your mutual fund ranks against others in its class. It's free. Give it a try. It's revolutionary. It's going to change the industry once we get the word of it out. Take a look at My Vital C. This is a remarkable molecule. It was discovered only about 40 years ago. Carbon-60, which is a molecule of 60 carbon atoms around a nucleus that has a tremendous longevity principles. I've been taking it for 4 years every day, taking their hair products and their creams for the skin. People are saying I'm looking younger, but my hair's come back with color. They also have these products for pets. If you like the show, please support our sponsors. Chris, any comments as we wrap up? I want to stay within the time limits today.
You mentioned just a short while ago the idea that the World Economic Forum and the global elites want to control the population and, of course, starve people out. Think about what they were looking at as far as Sri Lanka. That's a microcosm of what they want to happen. This is why They're trying to convince people that it's nitrogen that's the enemy. So we have to limit the food supply. We don't need farms to produce anything. That's a good way to starve people out. Also, the open immigration laws in rules in Europe. The idea is to get people out of the equatorial and tropical climates into the north.
I'm seeing Disneyland producing horrendous satanic films, and the attendance at Disneyland's going down. Bud Light may go have severe economic problems, which they should. We need to identify these woke companies, and we need to let them know we are not going to let our children be exposed to transgenderism in kindergarten. It's evil. They need to be taught fundamental skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic, basics. We need to get them back to Bible study. If we do these things, God will heal the land. I hate to think of what it may take this time when God decides he's going to win. So please continue to support the show, like the show, watch what we're doing, share it with your friends, put it on social media. And by the way, I'm doing articles now in the Gateway Pundit, which I'm detailing the Biden crimes, talking more about this in the future, but they're coming out of this report, which is Marco Polo report. If you go to my articles on the Gateway Pundit, and we'll start posting some of them here, you'll be able to you can download this report free. It's a color report. It's all the Biden crimes. I mean, it's a beautifully done book. I hesitate to show you very much of it because a lot of these pictures, although they're blocked in terms of being really lewd, there's an enormous amount of sex and drugs going on in the Biden crime family. Dr. Corsi, this is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Wednesday, it's July 12th, 2023. Thank you for joining us at Beat Truth Central. We're broadcasting every weekday. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless.